All right, Shoshana, welcome to the GTM Pack podcast. So excited to have you here.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Awesome. Well, I'm a big fan of yours. I've been following your content on LinkedIn and particularly around customer insights, which I think when it comes to product marketing doesn't get as much recognition. It's such a core part of the practice and maybe doesn't get as much attention as it deserves. So I'm really excited to dig deeper into that specifically. But before we get into that, maybe for those that aren't as familiar with you, you can give us a little bit of a background. Who's Shoshana? Like, tell us about your career background, and I always love hearing how people got into product marketing. Is there different ways that people get in? So it'd be great to hear your story of how you got into product marketing.
Yeah, I think like many of us, totally by accident. I started off in journalism. I worked at a newspaper doing, writing, editing, all kinds of things for over a decade and kind of knew about startups, but like it was not really my world. And then at a certain point, I was like, you know what? I'm gonna change my life around, and I made the jump. And kind of the closest was content marketing. I feel like that's sort of the closest to journalism. And so I jumped in there and worked at a startup as a content marketer for a while. And then when I decided to leave, I was looking around at, LinkedIn, different roles, and I saw some content stuff, but I saw this thing called product marketing, which I didn't really know what it was. But I looked at the job descriptions and I was like, oh, I think I could do that. I mean, I didn't have like some of the requirements. Like I hadn't worked on a product team. I did not have a STEM background, but I was like, oh, I could probably figure it out. So, so I basically just started applying, and I was lucky enough that someone took a chance on me, even though I had zero product marketing experience, zero product experience. But she saw like that I had the transferable skills and took the chance on me. And I've been doing product marketing ever since.
That's awesome. I think the most common thing I hear when I ask that question is people saying they had no clue what product marketing was when they first started doing product marketing, and they went deep and they fell in love with it. So really interesting to hear your background and how you've taken a similar path in a way, but through journalism, which I think really has a lot of unique and awesome qualities for a product marketer. So I'd love to actually hear your perspective. What do you think about your experience as a journalist? What has it brought to your role as a product marketer, and how has it sort of influenced or shaped you as a product marketer?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is curiosity, because you need that as a journalist, and it's an underrated characteristic of product marketers where it's not something that you often see on a job description. But if you don't have that innate curiosity, I don't know that you'll be a great product marketer, because you need to really want to understand how things work, and like how it all fits in. Like, how does this work? Why are you building it? What do the customers want? What do they need? How do those things fit together? And it's really driven by that curiosity, and also by kind of knowing that even if I don't know anything about a topic, like I already know that I can jump in and talk to a lot of people and do a lot of research and figure it out, because I've done that over and over in my journalism experience. So it kind of made me feel like, okay, yeah, I could just figure it out.
For sure. And I think, I come from a sales background into product marketing. And one of the things that I think that background struggles with, I think, there's benefits to that, right? Like writing copy and sort of positioning a story in a way that's very compelling is a strong suit for a sales background. But one of the things that's challenging, excuse me, with people with sales backgrounds is pausing and I think the best salespeople do it, but like some salespeople have a little bit of trouble pausing and asking questions and listening and asking follow up questions and just going deep enough without jumping into the pitch, right? Too soon they jump into the pitch and start like you've kind of found that one thing that your solution is a good fit for, and you start pitching instead of going deeper and deeper. And I can see how journalism as a background, um, you know, puts you in a unique position where you're more conditioned to ask that additional question, and really get the full story without jumping into the pitch, and maybe even never jumping into the pitch, right? Especially if you're not doing a pitch like meeting or conversation. If you're trying to do customer insights or customer discovery, getting the full story, right, is something that I think journalism probably it trains you to do, right?
Yeah, it's all about finding those puzzle pieces and putting them together to tell a coherent story. And that's what I do in product marketing every day.
Yep, for sure. Cool. Well, the other thing I noticed about you that really caught my attention was that you're a three-time founding PMM, right? And I'm just curious. I love that stage as well. I was a founding PMM. I then did sort of. Actually, I was a founding PMM at my second PMM job, but it was a little bit of a later stage company. I think they brought in product marketing a little later in the company's life. And then obviously now I'm a founder. So I'm doing sort of product marketing as a founder, which is also really, really cool. So I love that early stage. But I'm curious, why I guess put yourself through the pain of being a founding PMM multiple times. Jokes aside, why do you love that stage? And it, from your perspective, or what makes a good founding PMM? What are the like qualities that set a founding PMM apart from, say, like a PMM that is part of a team, or a PMM that's actually leading a team or building a team? I'm curious to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, well, there's no blueprint, right? So a lot of the job, I mean, what I really like about it is you're starting fresh. And so just like when you jump into, understanding the industry and understanding the product and understanding the customers, you're also jumping into understanding the gaps within the organization, because there's always going to be gaps, right? Otherwise, why do they hire you? And trying to understand like where you can fill those gaps, because there's so many different things that a product marketer could be doing. There's so many buckets, right? From positioning and messaging, product content, sales enablement, the customer stories like we talked about, and like a million other things. And like, are you going to be focusing more on pre-sales, on like, lead gen and helping with the pipeline? Or are you going to be focusing more on product education and, showing the customers what's new in the product, or any of the like millions of points along the way? And like, you just kind of go in, and the beauty of it is you kind of are just talking to your like stakeholders that you're anyway going to have to work with, and you're kind of just starting from scratch to understand like what their main gaps are, and then figuring out like how you can fill it. Like at my first role, which was both my first role as a product marketer and the company's first time having a product marketer, so that was my first time as founding PMM and my first time as PMM. Like one of the big things that I just saw just from talking to all the stakeholders was that like the product team was doing like a great job of like every sprint new features, and they're pretty disciplined and organized, but the customers didn't know what was going on and why their product was changing, because they kind of had done the product side but like had not really gotten to telling the customers like what was new, other than maybe like on an ad hoc basis and a like
Mhm.
customer success call type thing. So because I saw that was such a huge gap, so I kind of was able to just jump in and say, okay, I guess I'm doing product education and like kind of understanding what's new in the product, and then translating it into something that was customer friendly. And that was just my first project, because that was the biggest gap when I joined.
Yep. Yeah, I think the ability to make an impact like that, right, and see that there are major gaps existing in the organization is just so exciting, right? And I think also being able to define your own role within a company, right? Like product marketing can be so many different things. It can be positioning and messaging, customer insights. It can be competitive strategy. It can be sales enablement, right? And being able to sort of shape the role based on your interest and your background, but also based on what the company needs, and see that direct impact immediately is such an exciting part of being a founding product marketer. I think the downside maybe that folks who are thinking about this, and not downside, but I would say the other side of the coin is, it, like you said, there's no blueprint, right? Like if you're a salesperson joining a sales organization, even if you're like the first salesperson, which I've been as well, there's a little bit more of a blueprint, right? You know what your goal is. It's like, okay, I need to bring on customers. There's sort of like a method to the madness, right? In terms of like discovery call, demo, there's sort of like a blueprint to it. But product marketing is such a, it can be such an ambiguous role that it's both exciting and also the challenge, right? Of like shaping this to what is a good fit for you as the product marketer, but also for the organization that you're coming into. So I totally see the appeal, and I'm with you. Like, I don't know if I could be a later stage product marketer. I think that's the stage that gets me.
Yeah, it starts to feel boring when you're like, oh, there's a list of things I have to do. That's boring.
Yeah, and nothing to build, right? You're just sort of like maybe, you know, launching stuff and so on. I think there's always stuff to build. You just have to look for it, but sometimes it can feel that way, right? Like you're kind of just joined on the train and you're going for the ride instead of building the tracks, right? So that's really cool. I mentioned at the very beginning that I think of you as kind of the customer insights product marketer, right? That's the core of what I see you talk about on LinkedIn, and I know it's a core part of your offering as well as a consultant. And I mentioned, like, I think this is an often overlooked part of product marketing, right? I think we talk a lot about the launches and we talk a lot about the sales collateral, right? And we even talk about the positioning and messaging, which I think is like, okay, that is more foundational than let's launches, but there's still a part before that helps build the positioning, messaging, and all these other things, and that's customer insights. So, wanted to get your perspective on why customer insights is so important. I talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to get your perspective. And also, just for those that maybe haven't thought about customer insights in that way and how critical it is in the role, maybe you can talk a little bit about how customer insights feeds into all those different aspects of product marketing.
Yeah, I agree that customer insights is so undervalued because on the one hand, I feel like a lot of us know that like, oh, it's important to talk to customers, but for whatever reason, it's often not the kind of thing that the head of marketing or whoever's kind of in charge is asking for. And I feel like that's one of the challenges because as a product marketer, even if you're the founding product marketer, and so to some extent you're shaping it, but the organization still has like needs and demands and requirements, and the sales team wants another one pager, and there's millions of things, right? And very rarely is talking to customers on that list of demands. So I think one of the reasons it gets overlooked is because it has to come from the product marketer themselves very often. So you need to say like, yes, I know you're asking for us to like redesign the website or have a new sales deck or whatever, but let's wait a second. And that can be hard because no
Mm-hmm.
startup wants to wait a second, right? And like, let's kind of get a more strategic view and talk to customers. Now, the truth is I've never actually had the luxury of doing that while putting everything else on hold. It's usually you're doing it in parallel with a million other things that you're executing on. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, right? But to be able to kind of like say that, I think you need to like know for yourself how important it is because that kind of gives you the incentive, like even just internally, right, to be able to just push for it. And I think another part of it is because there's overlap with other teams. So that's another challenge because a lot of times product marketers may not know how to access the customers because that's not a relationship that the product marketer typically owns. So you have to like work with other stakeholders to do it. Now, that doesn't have to be an insurmountable obstacle. And I actually just wrote a playbook that's on the PMM Jetpack that Jason Oakley runs, and it's one of the things it talks about and walks people through is how to do this with like the customer success team, which usually owns the relationship. And it can actually be pretty straightforward to just build like a customer interview pipeline with the customer success team so that they're the ones who are saying like, hey, these are the customers that we're happy for you to talk to. They're the ones who are like making that initial ask. because they have the relationship with the customers. They're the ones you ask as a product marketer, like, hey, is it okay to talk to them now, because they're aware of any sensitivities. So I think it's doesn't have to be like a, this insurmountable obstacle, but you do have to do it in collaboration with the customer relationship owner. And so I think maybe sometimes product marketers are like, wait, I don't even know how to do this. I'm just gonna, and no one's asking for it. I've got a million things people are asking for, so I'm just gonna focus on that. But the thing is that the customer insights are so fundamental to everything else, because they can affect, like, one of the things that you can do to sell it internally is maybe like, say, okay, the sales team is always asking for case studies, right? We always want case studies. That can often be the easiest way into it. So, okay, we're going to do case studies. In order to get the case studies, let's start talking to customers. Boom, you have, like, permission to start getting that pipeline going, getting the interviews going. But once you have those insights, case studies are great, but it's just one of the things. Like, it can totally feed into positioning and messaging. You can use it for the actual copy. Like, it helps you understand why a customer, even what their problem is that they're trying to solve. So why are they even looking for a solution in the first place? And that in turn helps you reach other target customers who are in that same decision point, where, like, they may not even know that they're looking for a solution, or they know they're looking for a solution but not necessarily which solution. So how do you even get into their heads? The customers are the perfect people to tell you that.
Yeah, I feel like almost everything that you do in product marketing could start with a customer interview. You're working on new product page on your website, or you're looking to like update the homepage, or you're working on a new sales deck, or you're about to launch a new product into the market. Um, you know, Generally speaking, as a product marketer, you're looking at that blank page, and the first thing is like, okay, how do I position this thing, right? Like, you're thinking about the customer and trying to put yourself in their shoes and put those words together. That would be the words that are in their head. Why not just have a couple customer conversations, right? And use that as the starting point. I think it's just like you said, everybody wants the asset yesterday. There's a lot of pressure to get it out there, and for a product marketer, it's so easy to skip that step and to just start writing and just say, you know what, like, I feel like I know my customers well enough. Let me just kind of like put some words on paper, and I think like it will resonate with them. But the thing that I think one of the biggest mistakes we make as product marketers is that it's not about the output, right? Like, we're not just measured, or we shouldn't just be measured on how many tasks we're able to complete, a new website page or a new sales deck, right? It's on the outcome, right? And like that new product page generated more leads, or pushed somebody over the line to deciding that this was the right solution for you, or that sales deck really hit home and accelerated the sales process. And I think that only comes from that deep understanding of the customer, and speaking to the customer is the only way to get that deep understanding. So I definitely agree with you. It's something that like we skip because of the pressure to get that piece of content out there in the market. But again, it's not about the volume of content; it's about the outcome, and that's where the customer insights is so critical. You mentioned this the templates or the playbook that you have in the PMM Jetpack, Jason Oakley's. I'm a big fan of that tool, or that tool set that he's put together, and I was super excited when I saw earlier this week, I think, that you guys launched that. Maybe tell us a little bit about that. What could folks expect when they log in tomorrow to check it out? What do they have there now for their customer insight interviews?
Yeah, sure. So it walks you through the whole process of building a customer insights program. So, which is basically, you want to make this process efficient and repeatable, right? Like, it's great to talk to, one customer, two customers, but if you can get a routine going, then it will kind of be able to perpetuate itself, and you'll just be able to keep getting those insights. So it walks you through some of the ways that you can use the customer insights. So that includes positioning and messaging, like we said, but also ROI metrics,
Mhm.
competitive intel, sales enablement, software reviews, and also like getting insights into like refining your ideal customer profile and understanding if it's a good product market fit, and all the way through to like product usage, product education, influencing the product roadmap. Like there's it touches like every part of the organization. It's like crazy how much of an impact getting these customer insights can have. So that's one part of it. And then it also there's a template for building this customer interview pipeline with customer success. And there's another template for actually conducting the interview, the kinds of guidelines for the kinds of questions to ask, and
Mm.
also what to do with the insights. So, like how to categorize the insights so that you can kind of use them in all these other ways through across the organization.
Yeah, it sounds super valuable. I think there's so many aspects to this process, right? Like you said, understanding the impact it has on the different areas of the business to maybe be able to tell stakeholders why it's important and why it's worth that extra time and investment, all the way through to like, I guess, stakeholder management in terms of like, you're going to have to go to the sales team or the CS team more likely to ask them for that intro to the customer, right? And how to manage that situation. So definitely recommend checking out. I'm going to definitely dig into it after this because I think it's hugely valuable. As I said, this is like an overlooked area of product marketing, and something like this is so important. I want to bring up, I guess, a quote in a way, like a phrase that I've heard you say on podcasts. I've seen you write it on LinkedIn, and it's one of the best descriptions that I've seen of product marketing. And it's that product marketing is where product capabilities meet market needs. And I have this inkling. You tell me if I'm correct here, that you came up with that after many times facing situations where people didn't quite understand what product marketing was, and you were trying to like show them the light. Am I right there, or am I off?
Actually, I think it came to me. I was like commenting on someone else's post on LinkedIn, and I was like, "Oh, it's where product capabilities meet market needs," and I'm like, "Hey, that's
You're like,
good."
that's it. Well, anyway, I'm going to be using it to like show people the light because I think it's such a crisp sort of definition of product marketing, and there's so much to unpack there. But I'd love to hear sort of uh, how have you used that description to show people the light, and also maybe taking a step back, what do you think is? We talked a little bit about it here, but what do you think people get wrong about product marketing? Yeah, and then how does that sort of description help connect the dots for them in a way?
Yeah, so I think those questions are super connected because basically, like what I think a lot of times people get wrong, and you brought this up, is that they're always looking for those pretty assets, right? They're like, "Give me something pretty, give me something pretty," and that's really just one half of what I call like the product marketing feedback cycle, where if you think of it as like product capabilities on one side of the cycle and market needs on the other side. So what everyone's looking for is the stuff that's like the tip of the iceberg that's above the surface, and that's the pretty assets that goes from like the company out to the market. Those are like the deliverables. But what about the second half of the feedback cycle, right? There's that whole half below the surface, and that's the part that goes from the market back to the company. And those are the insights. And that includes customer insights, but it's also competitive insights. It's also industry insights. It's understanding the market and bringing those insights back to the company. And that it's like so crucial because it's the foundation for those pretty assets, right? Like what words are you going to put on the pretty assets? Like they should have some foundation in the market needs. And so it's basically like this is how I envision this feedback loop as the two sides of the equation, because you've got the company and the product capabilities, but like if you ask the product manager and they'll just like give you like a feature list and tell you about the algorithm, and that's great, but how does if you just have that, you don't have that much, because you have to understand what the market is looking for, what their goals are, what their needs are, what's happening in the industry. And then you need to combine those together so that you're taking the insights, putting them into the deliverables, and then feeding that back to the market, and then doing that over and over again.
Yep. No, I'm 100% with you there, and I'm in the business of pretty assets, right? That's sort of what we do, right? But I can tell you from
And I'm using
seeing.
it for one of my pretty assets.
Well, that's awesome. No, I appreciate that, and definitely that has its role. But I see it, every day, that if you don't have the right words to put on the pretty asset, and the right story to tell, and the right people to tell that story too, it doesn't matter how pretty those assets are, right? They're not gonna have any impact, right? They're not gonna land. So 100% that groundwork has to be done before you start putting the pixels to the paper, or the digital paper in this world, right? And start creating those outputs. Another thing that I've heard you talk about, which really clicked with me, I mean, it was a real aha moment, is when we think about customer insights, we and I've sort of done this myself. We immediately jump to, like, post purchase of product, right? Like, jump on a customer call, and it's all about, how are you using our product? What features do you like? What results did you experience? And that's awesome. I mean, I guess, like you said, case studies and stuff like that are great assets, but they're really like just one aspect of it. And I think I've heard you really focus a lot about pre-purchase, right? And understanding, where the buyer's mindset was at that point in time, and what challenges they were facing, and so on. So that really resonated with me. But I'm curious to hear from you. Why is that so important to know the customer journey pre-purchase? And if I could ask, if I'm trying to, like, improve my own customer insights interviews, what questions are your favorite questions, right? To really unpack that part of the buyer's journey.
Yeah. So what you're describing is what I put as giving more weight to the problem than the solution. Because like understanding how they use the product, what their favorite feature is, etc. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But what is the context that that sits in? How do they like what problem is it solving? And this ties back to like how does the product capability meet the market needs, right? Because if you're just asking the customer their feedback on the product capabilities, so that's just that one half of the equation. You also need to get their feedback on, like why do they even need to solve this problem? Why is it a big problem? And sometimes it's like this goes back to journalism also, right? Like it's that willingness to kind of put on the journalism hat and like ask questions that might seem dumb, right? It's like be willing to ask stupid questions because sometimes in a regular conversation, we don't, if someone says, oh, well, we needed to increase the blah, 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 like you don't want to sound dumb and say, but why is the blah, blah, blah important? But, but the important thing is you want them to say it because, first of all, when they say it explicitly, you might get a good quote, right, for one, but also you might get surprised because the reason that you think it's important might not actually be the reason that they give you, and it might take you in a whole different direction. I mean, um, I remember being told by customers that like, oh, once we were able to like see all our data clearly, then we were able to save millions of dollars because we realized that like we weren't using the funds in an efficient way and like changing how we. I was like, wait, what? Okay, whoa, like, and often that comes up at like the end of the conversation. When you think you've got everything, and actually, like, there's a whole new door to be open and to walk down. Because if you're just looking at like the solution, you're not comparing it to anything, and you're not getting into the mindset of the person who's going to be making a decision like next, who's going to be your target customers, right? You also want to use your current customers to get into the minds of your target customers. And if you're just talking to them as their current selves of the people who are already familiar with your product, already using it, then you're losing out and getting that insight into someone who isn't there yet. what are they looking for? What problems are they trying to solve? Why do they think it's so important to solve it? That's exactly the insights that you want, because you then want to use that to reach the customers that haven't signed yet, right? Like your new customers that are going to walk through the door next.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And I think this is another area, like if we go back to the beginning and we were talking about journalism and the sort of value of that experience, and then sales, which again has a lot of value in different ways in the product marketing role, but also one of the things that I think I struggle with is exactly what you mentioned, is asking those stupid questions, right? Or like feeling stupid, right? When you ask them. And in sales, you kind of like, you want to ask those questions sometimes that like lead them to a certain place, right? And in this case, you don't want that, right? You want to kind of push against that need to ask that question, and ask them those, like you said, seemingly stupid questions, but in reality, it's not like that. You don't maybe have an inkling or assumption on what the answer is. You want to know what the real answer is, not what your assumption is, right? So that makes total sense, and I think your point is right on. You hit the nail on the head. Is you know most of the people that you're marketing to, some might not even be problem aware, right? So it's interesting to understand the mindset of somebody that has a problem but is not necessarily aware of that problem, or maybe now they're just aware of the problem but they're not solution aware, and kind of understanding where their mind's at that point, and like how they're thinking about addressing the problem and what options they're starting to explore and where they go to explore those options, right? And then going through to now they're actually solution aware, and what are the different things that they're considering in the pros and cons. You have to understand all those aspects of the buyer journey, not just the, okay, I made the purchase now and how's it going, right? I mean, that has its place for sure, and we talked about like social proof and case studies and all that stuff, but really a lot of the other aspects of product marketing is getting people to move along that journey and giving them the little breadcrumbs that they need to go along the way. And the only way to do that effectively is to know what that journey looks like for buyers, right? So
Yeah.
totally makes sense.
And it's also a great way to get competitive intel, because once you're kind of taking the customer back to that point in their journey where they're considering whether they even want to change, like why do they want to leave their status quo, right? That's like super important
Yeah,
for to
huge.
know in the marketing and sales process, because that's often the biggest thing that you're fighting, is that they're just going to stay with their status quo. And then the next biggest thing is, okay, you're looking at different solutions. What's the basis, like what are you comparing them on? What criteria are you looking at? And usually they're also very willing to talk about even competitors once they're kind of in the mindset, because it's like they're just kind of telling the story about how they got to
Mhm.
you. So it feels a little bit less, like you're aggressively saying, tell me about this competitor. It's like you're kind of having a conversation, and like as they're walking you through that process, it's just much more natural. So, you're kind of like, oh yeah, what other solutions were you looking at? And sometimes they've used your competitor solutions and they didn't like it, and they're actually like really well placed to tell you exactly why they didn't like it and why they were looking for something else. Or if they didn't use it, maybe they were considering it, they had a demo with someone else, they could tell you what that was like from the customer perspective. Like that's such valuable information. But you just need to like be able to take them back to that pre-buying stage and walk through that journey with them in order to get those insights.
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. Well, this has been super fun, Shoshana. I expected it to be, a rich conversation, and this definitely didn't disappoint. I think we'll have to do another session where we deep dive into customer insights even further. Maybe take a look at some of your templates. But for those that want to follow you along and learn more from you, and one thing that I noticed in particular is that you've been awesome in helping other PMMs with, I think you call micro mentoring, right? Helping new PMMs break into product marketing. So if somebody's listening out there and they want to follow you and get in contact with you and connect with you, where are the best places for them to find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn way too much, so that's really the best place to find me. Shoshana Kordova. It's like Cordoba, the city in Spain, but with a can of E. Um, it is actually named after the city in Spain.
Oh, cool.
My father's
Very
family
cool.
was all from there back before the Spanish Inquisition. And and that's the best place to reach out. And I also have my link there for, I call it like pick my brain. And that's where like I do the micro mentoring sessions. It's basically, like just kind of half an hour where I just talk to people while I'm on my evening walk outside. So it's good for me because if I know I have, I call it my youngest child calls it a walkie talkie. So I've adopted that. So like if I know I have a walkie-talkie on the calendar, it's like extra incentive for me to put on my sneakers and go for my walk. So it's it's win-win.
That's
um,
awesome.
yeah, and yeah, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Yeah,
Awesome. And the PMM Jetpack, definitely check that out as well. I know I'm going to be digging in there. But Shoshana, thanks so much again for taking the time today and diving into customer insights with us. Really appreciate you coming on the pod.
yeah, it was great to be here. Thanks a lot.